I'm joined now by Luke Murphy. Luke is a performer and choreographer based between Cork, New York and Brussels. He has created and performed works throughout Ireland, UK and the USA, and in 2014 he founded Thematic projects. This year he has just worked as choreographer with Dance Limerick's Step Up programme. Welcome, Luke. It's good to have you.
Hi, nice to be here.
Great. So I'm going to jump right in. First of all, can you give us a brief overview of the Step Up programme?
Yeah, the Step Up programme was a response to a feasibility study in 2010, and they basically contacted everyone they could find who trained abroad because there's no conservatory for dance or no training, professional training for dance in Ireland. And they kind of did a survey to see how to fill this gap of all of these young performers going off and training abroad. And then for the most part, people would stay abroad and their careers would happen abroad and they'd never really have an interaction with Ireland afterwards. And they put out this questionnaire, and the kind of overwhelming response from it was that at some point in time, you know, it would be great to have full professional training in Ireland and have a university program for contemporary dance in Ireland. But at the time, you know, there just wasn't the resources there. So they founded the Step Up project, which is it's to encourage people who just recently finished their conservatory training to kind of come back to Ireland and work with an Irish choreographer and maybe an international choreographer for about 3 months. And then they get a chance to kind of show that material, and hopefully the dance community come and see and get to meet these performers and see them work and see them perform. And it's a way for them to kind of integrate into the scene and have long, wonderful careers in Ireland, hopefully.
I mean, that's the ideal, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then everything will be great forever. Yeah.
If only. We can always hope. So can you tell me about your process? Because like the group of 6 individuals, certainly that you have this year, I've had a look at their CVs. They're an incredibly impressive bunch of people. So can you tell me about going into the room and working with those amazing, young, exciting people? Where do we even begin?
Yeah, well, there was it was an amazing group this year. They were really mature and they were really experienced, actually, and really while people were kind of recently out of training, there was you just weren't dealing with people who were kind of deer in the headlights. People were really willing to get down and just get to work. Now with COVID and everything, I think everyone was just happy to actually be in a room working, even with, you know, the kind of lengthy restrictions that were in place. So I normally start, it's a short process, you know, 2 weeks to kind of make a pieces would be fairly short. So we just started just getting to know each other, and we just improvised a lot for a couple of days. And I did an exercise where we say this, the 6 people in the room, and we say up to 3 people can be in the space moving at one time, and you come and go as you want. So there's no kind of start and stop. You just enter and work and leave as you feel, as feels right for you. And the 3 kind of prompts are who you are, who you want to be, and who you think the world see. And that's through a lens of as a dancer. So like the dancer that you are, the way that you move, the kind of vocabulary and rhythm and physical patterns that are really feel a home base for you. And then the kind of dancer that you wish you could be. And then also maybe the lens of kind of the dancer that you think, the toolkit that you think the world sees, or that you think people see when they look at you. Because as a freelancer and as a dancer in a freelance and a kind of a gig culture, what happens frequently now, especially on short projects, is that choreographers will very quickly identify really strong, prominent traits in a performer and will use those. And if you have a couple of really strong, prominent traits, then the same things are being used over and over again. And that's not good for the identity of different choreographers' work, but it's also really not good for a performer themselves to constantly be used for the same things. So kind of identifying what those things are, and also identifying the things that are part of you that have nothing to do with that. So we can kind of crack open that box and say, all right, we're not going to just restrict ourselves to those things, and we're not going to contain ourselves by what we think the world wants from us as performers. So that was the beginning. Was just getting to know each other that way and just trying to figure out what the palette could be between us and how we could kind of trust ourselves to go in any direction. It was great.
Yeah, it must be it must be quite fun to play with that alchemy when you've got a bunch of dancers who are coming from such a variety of backgrounds and training and all of that, and to put that together in a room and kind of play with that.
Yeah, I mean, play is really that's the word really, because it feels very
Mm.
playful and it feels very adventurous. And you're trying to create in a world where like really revealing yourself is like the most dangerous thing you can do. You're trying to create the safest possible space so that people can do this really dangerous thing. Um, or like perceived as a really dangerous thing.
Yeah.
and um, and it's great because people are so different, and that kind of nervous energy, once you can kind of get that nervous energy of people not knowing each other or people feeling like they need to kind of impress or anything, once you can kind of diffuse all that, it actually becomes really nice and really empowering that everyone's so different, because you can just that kind of the dancer that you wish you were or the dancer that you're not, you can be whatever you want. It's like a role. You can move any way as if you work on it. So if you have a lot of different people in there with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different pathways, all of those things are transferable. It just takes time and the will to kind of to work on it and do it. So it's a nice way, it's a nice kind of laboratory way to bring all that into a space and to kind of actually say, we might think that the options are this big, but actually the palette of options is so much wider. We just have to like see it and be willing to take everything that is available.
Yeah, absolutely. That process must be incredibly freeing to you and the others as performers and dancers.
Yeah, it's freeing to me. I guess you'd probably have to ask them if it's freeing to them or not. um, I mean, like I work so much as a performer myself, and performing is it's such a big part of my life. Even though I've spent a lot of time, especially in the last couple of years, mainly making work. Um, my instincts as a performer are a huge part of what guides my decisions in the studio with work that I'm not performing in as well. So I'm really interested in making sure that as a performer, I'm not kind of restricting myself into one set of tools or one identity or one type of role. So I really like trying to create a room where you can actually say, yeah, this might be what you think you are, but actually you can be anything in this space. So if it works well, hopefully it's really freeing. Here's hoping. Yeah.
We'll see. So ordinarily, Step Up finishes with a finalized piece that then tours nationally. Obviously, that's not possible this year. So you sort of recalibrated and you spent the past week filming a dance film in Cork. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I did my kind of big lockdown period down here in the Sheepshead Peninsula, and I was down here when I was contacted about the project, and I kind of said like, all right, well, if we film down here, I can actually really work on it beforehand, and I can find sites, and I can figure out where I want to go, and I can find a kind of a glue through location that will bind this thing together. And if someone says they're going to make a film, this because there's a script and there's a storyboard already. There's so much of the work is actually already done in terms of transferring it from one medium to another. But frequently with dance, because you're dealing with just this abstract language, what happens is that a completely different voice will come in where someone says, okay, I'm going to take this movement and I'm actually going to put it over here. And then the intention of the work can be totally changed or diffused or broken apart because a filmmaker can have a completely different concept of what they want to do with it, and that can be wonderful. But for me, I kind of said like, well, I want to make a piece. I don't want to just make movement that someone else is going to use for their own work. So filming down in Cork let me kind of say, all right, I'm going to conceive of a work that's really about these people interacting with this land and this space and this kind of nature of rock and grass and wind. So yeah, it was really interesting. Everyone got really cold and wet, but it was great.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it was Lucy Dawson, right, was the filmmaker that you were working with on that. How was that collaboration between you and her in terms of just what you were saying about like the setup and moving pieces over there and all of that? What was that collaboration like for you?
That was great. It was great. Yeah, Lucy was really great to work with, and because I kind of said like, look, I want to kind of find the locations and I want to do a lot of this legwork myself. She was really accommodating in that way, and there was no kind of artistic arm wrestle or anything going on. We really just kind of fused up what we were trying to find and the aesthetic of it, and she's great. She also got very cold and wet, but that's okay.
Absolutely. And so when can we expect to see that finished product? Is that like in the foreseeable future? Is it a couple of weeks away?
I hope so. Yeah. It's a good question. It could be. I think we're supposed to edit at the end of the month, so I have no idea. I think we're working at the end of September, so sometime after that.
Wow, fantastic. And are you looking forward to that? Is that a part of the process that you enjoy when you're creating work on film, the editing?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah. I used to edit everything myself, and then at one point I didn't, and it was great. You know, it was one of those moments where you let go of something, you say, actually, people can do this much better than me, and that's brilliant. So it's nice to be involved, and it's nice to kind of be able to kind of say this is how it's conceived, and not let it stray too far from that, or unless it needs to, or it's better. But I'm looking forward to kind of just touching base and seeing how it's put together. Yeah.
I suppose that's one of the unique differences between working in film compared to live performance. So can you tell me about for you what those differences or challenges are between making work for live performance versus making work for film?
Well, what I found actually was really nice about it was that on this project, I got to have these two really different processes, which were both really pleasant because I had this 2 week period in a studio where I got to choreograph and I got to be in the space and work with dancers and be physical myself, and all of that's really what I'd be used to, and it's really that's what I live for, like that's the thing that I like to do. But actually, the process of filming, it's really satisfying because normally when you get to a theater, you check the work, and then there's this kind of cold moment where you have to just sit down, especially if you're not performing, and like you sit down and you wait for the show to happen, and you're just totally disempowered from this thing that has been so important to you, and like it's such a I just want I just hate that. I hate that moment. Like that's one of the reasons I perform in my work is because I hate that moment of just being removed from this thing that I put so much thought into. But then in comparison, it's actually in film during the shoot is actually where you have to have your eyes have to be the most open. You're working the longest hours. You're the most heavily involved. You're giving feedback, and between every single take, you're able to kind of engage so fully with the material at that time where it's really being performed or being made. And that's really satisfying, and it's really exciting to kind of actually be kind of saying no. It's almost like a performance that you're able to pause and just restart, and the audience are just like held in stasis in the middle of it. So you're kind of it's like a perfectionist stream actually, you know like our control freak stream. Yeah.
Absolutely. I suppose it offers you control where the viewer's eye is at any moment in film, which you can't do in live performance. So you can capture these amazing magical moments that happen in a way that you can't always do in live performance either.
Yeah, and performance is it's so fragile, especially in movement, because like an audience when they're watching a dance show, if they really really believe it, if they like that, if it's a really really good show, there's never a moment where they sit back and they think, oh, those dancers are really good, because they're just
Yeah.
involved and they just believe that the dance is the language, the way that you never notice an actor and say that person really enunciates their consonants well. You know, like you never notice, like, you know, you never, in a good play, you never kind of notice that someone's accent is good. And likewise in a good dance show, you never notice the craft around it. It's only when something's bad, and a lot of the time, when not when it's bad, but when it drops, or when the reality of it is kind of dropped for a moment, and that's reliant on such a finite level of detail that's really hard to maintain for an hour of performance. You know, it's really hard for a performer and for a company of performers to maintain that level of detail consistently over 100 shows every night. So the like performing movement, it's a really like there's it's a really high stakes between something being good and something being great. Um, while in film, with filming, with the fact that you can actually pursue the best take, it means that you're able to break the material up to a point that you can actually really pursue, you know, something that really doesn't drop and doesn't lose that level of detail, and doesn't so you can be really meticulous about why something worked and why something didn't on a performative level, because there are short takes and you get a chance to do it again. So that's really nice. You know, that's really nice. I hope that's reflected in what we actually put together at the end of it. But it was a really nice process.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. So your company, Attic Projects, was a company in residence at the Frick and Crane. How important was it for you to have a space to develop and create your work?
Really, very important. You know, I think that I was there for about 2 years. And then after that, I was in Dance Ireland for a year. And before that, I was in residence in a theatre in New York for a few years. Um, yeah, having a kind of a sense of home is really important. So since 2018, I've been working at St. Luke's, the Crypt in St. Luke's, which is run by the Cork City Council. And yeah, having a place that you can actually feel ownership of is really nice, and not ownership, but something more a sense of home. Because again, it's this thing of finding like the safety around being able to kind of really not have anything that holds you back in a space, and not have anything that you want to actually make everything around the making of the work as comfortable and as easy as possible, so that there's nothing detracting from just going completely full force into the room when you're working. So yeah, it was great. And I mean, I'm very attached to Cork, and I'm very I feel it's really important to me to try and be making work in Cork, and it feels really important to me from having worked abroad for so long, that if I'm going to be in Ireland, to actually have that there's a foothold of dance being made there, because the community is quite small. And a lot of the time, because so many of the resources in Ireland are in Dublin, what happens, a lot of artists from around the country, they feel this kind of pressure to kind of get sucked into this space, because also Dance Ireland and the Fringe Lab are really nice spaces to work. So, but that's not actually the best thing for the country, I don't think. So I'm very kind of bullish about trying to maintain a practice in Cork, and maintain a presence there.
Yeah, and because you run workshops as well, don't you, in normal times in
I
Cork?
do, yeah. I do, yeah. I have a workshop festival I run at the Midsummer Festival. So I bring in about 10 international choreographers and about 25 dancers. And we run a kind of a small professional development festival there every summer, which is really nice. I
And
also normally
have you
produce.
seen?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask: have you seen a growth and a positive growth and development now in terms of dance in Cork since you've kind of started doing that work there?
Um, yes and no. I would say, like, the community is still quite small. And the resources for dance in Cork aren't so developed. So part of I'm kind of pursuing trying to develop that at the moment, and that's been a real project for over the next couple of years, and over the past year, is to try and make it a more accommodating space for people to actually feasibly be and work and feel like there's a vibrant making community of making going on around them. What the workshop festival so far has done is that it introduces a lot of people to the space and to the Midsummer Festival and to each other. So there's a lot of international students that come, and then there's a lot of Irish students. So there's a really nice pollination of people meeting. Because so often, because like, you know, even though we're part of Europe, we're this little island, and while there's this huge travel in the dance community all around continental Europe, that doesn't really come over to Ireland so much. So to try and get people to integrate a bit more, just even in terms of having friends that are dancers in other countries, can be helpful when you're looking for a couch, you know. You know, so all of it's there's this kind of, there's something brewing there, which is really, really nice. I'm hoping that the dividends pay in a couple of years' time, or in a few years' time, or
Yeah, no doubt they will. More power to you. Your own work is quite multidisciplinary in its nature. How did you find your way into that work, or has it kind of always been a part of what you do?
it's probably always been kind of part of what I do. My first job as a performer was an apprentice with a choreographer called Bilty Jones, who, you know, works, or like, it's very theatrical work. It's work that uses a lot of projection and like very complicated sets. Then the mainstay work I've had as a performer was with this company Punch Drunk, which is a theater company.
Yeah.
So you know, I've worked with them for 10 years. So there's like, from that, you just can't, like, that's a lens through which I kind of see work now, is like dance as a movement, as a language, but that actually we're making theater, and I think of all the work I make as theater. So probably always, I'm just hoping that I'm getting better at it as I go. You know.
I
Uh,
actually saw the Drowned Man in London. I was in London at the time when that was on, that I believe you were in, and it was one of the most astonishing pieces of theatre I've ever experienced in my life. And it stayed with me for a long time afterwards, actually, because I'd never experienced theatre like that before. So congratulations on that one in particular. It was incredible.
so yeah, it was a lovely project.
So your work, from what I've seen, often seems to have quite a strong thematic element to it. I'm thinking here of the likes of Carnivore and Villains. What is your starting point, if any, when you create work?
Oh, good question. Probably, like with villains, there was a few things. I was trying to figure out how to make a show that would feel like a comic book. Um,
Mm.
so there was that going on kind of on one side of, you know, like Five Notebooks ago, there was something to do with comics and animation, because I'm like a really big animation and comic junkie. So so it was that. It was just trying to figure out like how to bring that kind of black and white, like, yeah, flickering world on stage. And then maybe through that and all the stuff that was happening, just it kind of felt like a bit of a politics just felt like were getting so cartoonish, that then there was some kind of relationship there, and and then looking at the kind of everything being so epic, you know, like everything is like, even now the debates have got this gladiatorial music going on as an introduction, and every week the rugby teams are announced and they play this like gladiatorial, like epic music to show the team, and everything is like blockbuster, like everything has to be, to get people's attention, everything has to be. So then when everything's that extreme, that basically, and this is a really long answer to your question, but basically it doesn't happen in one go. It's normally a kind of a collection of different things that kind of sit together. um and I draw, and I just draw an awful lot, and I kind of just have loads and loads of scribbles in notebooks, and a lot of the time it's then just kind of, I won't know that they'll be fitting together to make a piece, or that they'll be fitting together towards the concept of a piece, until much later, and then I kind of, they just form over time a little bit.
Amazing.
Sorry,
Um,
that's a really futzy. That's actually probably it. My brain is like a big scrambled egg, and that's how the pieces come together. Like, that's probably pretty much it. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So, obviously, this year has been something of a pause in presenting work and putting work on. But how has it been for you? Has it allowed you time to kind of percolate yourself and like your next? Are you going to be launching into 2021 with a bang, or have you got stuff kind of on the back burner? How's it been?
Good. It was good. I was supposed to spend March 15th to whatever it was, like May 2nd. I was supposed to be in the States working on a book. So I didn't go to the States, but I just worked on the book in West Cork. So and then by the time May rolled around, I was kind of unproducing a show that was supposed to have happened in June and then redoing it as a different version. So weirdly, my year wasn't massively interrupted actually. Like I was supposed to have a performing contract that was cancelled, but for the most part, my year, I didn't quite have what a lot of artists had, where everything was wiped clean and they went, fuck, I didn't have that. Like, I didn't have that moment. I was very fortunate that didn't happen quite as immediately like as it did for a lot of people. So it was just really kind of constantly rejigging things to later in the year and figuring out when I could do things and how I could do things. I don't know what I'm doing next year, to be absolutely honest. I find out about my funding in a few weeks' time, so I guess when I know if I have any money to do anything, then I'll figure it out. One thing I'm kind of excited about is that the fact that the capacities for theatre and dance, that like indoor performance, the fact that the capacities are so shot to ribbons means that actually there's types of work that wouldn't be seen as feasible normally, that now you could actually approach someone and they are feasible because the capacities can't be big anyway. So if you approached a festival with a show for 2 people a year ago, they would have had a really hard, you'd have some very hard conversations on your hands, while now some of those concepts that are really kind of off the beaten path and that might be very difficult to find a way to fit into an overall program, there's actually a huge amount of people are kind of looking for ideas now. So there's kind of a really nice, like I like the idea of making a show for 2 people. I like the idea of a show that someone's just given a pirate radio station frequency and a coordinate, and they turn up and they watch someone through binoculars into a building across the way. Like I like the idea of doing a show like that. So I'm really excited actually if to that what you might be able to do in the midst of, okay, everything that we normally do can't happen, so let's do all of the unfeasible small weird stuff for a little while.
I would love to go see a show where I've got a radio frequency and binoculars and I'm looking at like an empty building across the way. Make that work. Please make that show. I would love to see that. So for you, what do you think dance in Ireland needs right now and moving forward as we come out of this weird time and moving forward? What do you think that it needs?
Well, to be absolutely honest, I kind of think it needs a little bit more equity in the funding, which was a big part of the conversation with the dance sector and the Arts Council over lockdown, because when you hire a production manager for a dance production, they don't suddenly say, oh, you only get half as much money from the Arts Council, let me work for half as much money. So all of these things cost the same, and the expectation is that you'll meet those costs with half the funding that and now what's happening is that people in dance in Ireland are actually making really ambitious work on a production level. So there's a lot of people making work in Ireland that are making work that requires just as intricate a level of technical and production support as theatre companies. And then a lot of the festivals are actually headlining dance work in their festivals now that mightn't have been doing that a number of years ago. So actually kind of a better equity in terms of acknowledging the expenses that dance has would be one thing, because what happens is that it's artists' fees and it's kind of double jobbing is where that's where the ends get made up. And then that's where you just have people kind of basically getting burnt out, or you have people people who aren't directly in the field, like stage managers and lighting technicians and lighting designers, they know they just end up not wanting to work in dance anymore because the circumstances aren't as good, and that's kind of that's like something that will be really problematic in 10 years time if it's not addressed right now. So that would be one thing. I kind of think that changing the way in which people's expectation of seeing dance is something that could be a really nice result of COVID. I think that there's a lot of really amazing postmodern work in the world. There's a lot of really amazing postmodern dance, and there's a lot of really great, like really fantastic postmodern contemporary dance makers. There's also a kind of an association with contemporary dance sometimes, that you're going to go in and you're going to be stuck in a room sitting down for an hour and a half, and someone is going to come in and kind of hold a banana and take 3 steps and then go bibbidi bobbidi, and then you're going to listen to someone hit one piano key every 17 minutes for 45 minutes, and that's going to be the music. And it's kind of it's a fixed expectation that some audiences have, that they say, okay, I don't think I want to check that show out. That's dance. I don't think so. But then those same people will go to see ballet because they don't associate it when they think of ballet, and they'll go see it's experimental theater that uses movement because they don't think of that when they think of theater. So there's a branding thing with dance. There's a kind of an expectation that needs maybe some pulling apart. And I think the way in which, I think bringing people to see a show in a car park with a band and a beer sponsor would be a great way to get people to go like, okay, I can see this and it can challenge me, but it doesn't have to challenge my attention span. So I think that's happening. And I think that there's the quality of work in Ireland is really, really strong. Like, people are making really, really class work here. But I think there's stuff around how it's presented and how audiences think of dance when they hear about it, that I think that's something that the form could kind of do with like ringing and washing out and something.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's less that the dance itself needs to change, it's more the image, like the PR.
That's a massive PR issue. It's got a massive PR issue, and it's got a massive kind of, you're kicking and screaming to get reviews a lot of the time, and so a lot of the infrastructures around allowing upward mobility within the dance field it's just not quite there. Getting the Abbey to kind of acknowledge dance as an equal form, as a theatrical form. There's if you go across Europe, most national theatres across Northern Europe have got dance in their national theatres, just programmed without it being some sort of massive ordeal or kind of big or out of the ordinary that it's in there. So audiences just begin to expect it, so that hasn't happened because the literary tradition in Ireland is really strong, and it's not that there's anyone saying no, keep the dancers out. It's just something that there hasn't been a really concerted effort to actually say no, bringing them in. So I think there's a lot of stuff around that doesn't need to change, but it would be nice if it changed.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And here's hoping that, the new, young, exciting artists coming up through the likes of Step Up, that those waves will start to happen and those changes will be made. And hopefully we're in for a new era of dance in Ireland. That would be very exciting.
Yeah, here's hoping. There's a lot of great artists making good work here. So that's the main thing. If the quality is there, people will see it and people will come, and then there you go.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the saying goes. Okay, well, Luke, that's it. That's all my questions for today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I could actually chat to you for hours more.
Oh.
But thank you so much. And I'm so excited to see the Step Up film when it comes online. And I'm really excited to see whatever you come up with next year and the year after. Do make that show with the binoculars in a building from afar. Genuinely, that would be amazing.
Yeah, It's on the list. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a million.